Among us, everyone is probably familiar with the term conspiracy theory. About 90% of conspiracy theories worldwide are largely for entertainment purposes. However, what if they were used to deceive the world, not for just a few years, but for nearly a century? Let's explore one of the most significant deceptions of the century: the Hitler Phantom. Here, we are all aware of the name Hitler, the infamous leader of the Second World War Axis powers. Let's set aside the primarily fanciful conspiracy theories, such as Hitler collaborating with extraterrestrials or secret underground bases, as these are mostly for amusement. Nevertheless, these theories highlight the immense influence Hitler had, creating an invisible fear associated with him. Since coming to power in 1933, Hitler and the Nazi Party transformed Germany into a military camp and a colossal war machine. Particularly, he placed great emphasis on indoctrinating the populace and establishing extreme nationalism in every German. Evidence of this is Hitler's famous slogan, "If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed." Alongside this, the Gestapo apparatus was ready to eliminate anyone with opposing views. Clearly, he succeeded in making the majority of Germans worship him and propagate the idea of Aryan supremacy. Combined with brilliant military and scientific minds, he initiated the most devastating war in human history, the World War II. Despite the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany, the obsession it left on the world runs deep, especially the haunting legacy of Hitler. In World War II, Britain, America, and Soviet Union were nominally allies, but they didn't fully trust each other. This lack of trust was evident in the slow delivery of promised aid shipments to the Soviet Union. In 1942, when the battlefronts in Stalingrad and Leningrad were at their most critical, the Soviet Union requested that Britain and America open a second front in Europe to divert German forces. Both promised but failed to act on this request. It wasn't until 1944, when the Soviet Union had surpassed Germany in both quality and quantity of forces, that Britain and America realized that the Soviet Union could defeat the Axis alliance entirely. They were concerned that if the Soviet Union accomplished this, they would not stop at punishing Germany, but would also seek to conquer all of Europe. It was at this point that America and Britain decided to launch the liberation of France and, more broadly, Western Europe before the Soviet Union could become even stronger. By the time Nazi Germany surrendered in May, the only remaining Axis faction was Japan. The Soviet Union launched an offensive against Japanese forces in Manchuria, while America conducted amphibious assaults on Iwo Jima and Okinawa, accompanied by aerial bombardment on the Japanese mainland. Then came the fateful day that marked the end on August 6 and August 9, 1945. 2 atomic bombs were dropped on Japan. This marked both the conclusion of the war and served as a threat to the Soviet Union. Stalin recognized the terrifying potential of this weapon after World War II ended. While the Soviet Union emerged as the victorious side, their losses were staggering. 27 million people perished, and their economy was devastated. Stalin believed that his nation was in a weaker position than both America and Britain. He needed to do something to divert their attention, allowing his country time to recover. At this moment, an idea took hold in his mind. Since the Soviet Union had attacked Germany and captured Berlin first, and had also obtained a portion of Hitler's remains, if Stalin kept this information to himself, America and Britain would have no way of knowing what had happened to Hitler. Meanwhile, the world's media was intensely interested in whether Hitler was still alive or had died. And if he had died, where was his body and where was the evidence? With all of this in mind, Stalin created one of the greatest deceptions in human history. How was Hitler still alive? Stalin gave the world a hoax, costing not only billions, but also leading to manipulation for nearly a century. Many people believed that Hitler had escaped after World War II. Indeed, he not only survived, but existed throughout the 20th century into the 21st century. His survival was due to the cunning deception of the Soviet leader, Stalin. This grand deception has grown to the extent that, to this day, you can go online and find thousands of conspiracy theories and articles written about it. On April 30, 1945, the Red Army entered the capital, Berlin, and the future of Nazi Germany seemed all but over. Chief of Staff Wilhelm Keitel informed Hitler, "We cannot avoid a complete defeat." In agony, just married the day before, Hitler and his wife, Eva Braun, committed suicide together. Heinz Link, Hitler's loyal valet, rushed into the sealed room upon hearing the gunshot. 2 bodies lay there, and he, along with another aide, carried them outside. Following the instructions in Hitler's will, they used gasoline to cremate the bodies of the Hitler couple, fearing they would fall into the hands of the Soviet Union. The Nazi leader was afraid his remains would be put on display in a museum. The next morning, their deaths were announced on German radio. A unit of the Soviet counterintelligence agency quickly reached the location where Hitler had committed suicide. After several days of searching, they discovered ashes and bone fragments, including jaw fragments, buried beneath a layer of soil in the garden area. Through investigative documents and the verification of Kathy Hauserman, Hitler's longtime dental assistant, who had cared for his dental records for many years, the death of the dictator was officially confirmed. This information was classified as top secret, known only to Soviet leader Stalin and a few select intelligence officers. From here, the greatest hoax of the century was born. On June 9, 1945, on Stalin's orders, Marshal Zhukov made a controversial statement in the media, saying, "We have not found Hitler's body. It is possible he escaped in the final hours." This rumor immediately spread like wildfire worldwide, and you might wonder, did they really believe Zhukov's words so easily? Of course, it wasn't solely based on this statement, but rather, they reinforced their belief with his pronouncement. During the late stages of the war, the notorious Gestapo of Nazi Germany had established escape routes and connections for high-ranking German officers, their assets, and families to countries like Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, and others. These escape routes were later discovered by Israeli intelligence units. This further supported the possibility that Hitler could have escaped. At a time when doubts persisted, Stalin played a clever move to make his fabricated story more believable. In July 1945, Stalin met with 2 Allied leaders, Truman and Churchill, to plan the occupation and division of German territories and issued an ultimatum to Japan. When Churchill asked Stalin, "Can your agents find Hitler's whereabouts?" the Soviet leader replied with a nonchalant expression, "I think he is still alive and hiding somewhere, possibly in Argentina or Japan." With a Hollywood-worthy expression, many people believed that Hitler was indeed still alive and hiding somewhere, including the future President of the United States, Eisenhower. He even stated in front of the media, Hitler might still be alive. This statement from one of the most respected and credible generals in the world caused significant ripples, even among those who had previously doubted. In the midst of this uncertainty, Eisenhower made another statement, this time clarifying his earlier remarks and asserting that Hitler had indeed died. However, the simpler something appears, the more people tend to believe it harbors complexity and hidden secrets. The global media disseminated this news far and wide, and the outcome exceeded even Stalin's predictions during the following period. The entire world was on a quest to find Hitler. This led Western intelligence agencies to pay less attention to the activities of the Soviet Union. True to Stalin's intentions, given that everyone was focused on Hitler, the Soviet Union took advantage of the situation to infiltrate numerous intelligence networks within the enemy's organizations. Additionally, they bolstered their intelligence and covert operations apparatus in Eastern Europe. Stalin's role was completed, and the remaining tasks fell to the GRU, the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, and the KGB, the Committee for State Security. These 2 organizations spread the Hitler specter worldwide, from Latin America to Africa, Asia, and even within the United States, Germany, and the UK. Alongside this, the KGB instructed its agents to infiltrate the most significant and credible media organizations globally to propagate these rumors. Images of Hitler seemed to appear everywhere, and the Western world chased this phantom for decades. However, as the irrationality mounted, they began to realize that they might have been deceived, but couldn't find concrete evidence to support their suspicions. Somehow, the Soviet Union managed to fabricate convincing fake images, blaming the Western adversaries for concealing Hitler. So, from being the ones searching for the culprit, the West became unwitting accomplices in this charade. As for the media, they quickly seized this rare opportunity and capitalized on the rumor industry, raking in hundreds of millions of dollars for years. Millions of articles and hundreds of books emerged to reinforce the belief that Hitler was alive and to blame government intelligence agencies as utterly inept. So why couldn't the likes of the CIA, Mossad, MI6, MI5, and other world-class organizations do anything about it? The answer can only be that KGB had outwitted them. Returning to 1945, Hitler's remains were found by the Soviet Union, consisting of charred remains, 2 skull fragments, one of which had a gunshot hole, and 2 carefully packaged jawbones. These body parts were buried by the KGB in an undisclosed location in East Germany. In 1970, as Western powers were facilitating the process of German reunification, Yuri Andropov, then head of the KGB, ordered the exhumation of Hitler's remains. The ashes were scattered into a river, retaining only the box containing the skull and jawbones that had been verified as Hitler's. These remains were secretly kept in Moscow, since only the Soviet Union knew what was left of Hitler's body, and they never disclosed it. I won't say it, and you won't say it, so no one will ever know the truth. After a period of silence, this rumor subsided, and it seemed like no one would care anymore. However, in 2000, Russia and the United States pushed it back to the top trending spot, commemorating the 55th anniversary of the victory over fascism. Russia organized an exhibition about Hitler's final days and, for the first time, partially disclosed Hitler's remains. In 2009, American scientists were permitted to examine the DNA from the skull fragments and jawbones attributed to Hitler. The results were quite peculiar, as they identified them as belonging to a woman aged 20 to 40. The Russian government refused to acknowledge these findings, alleging that the American samples were fraudulent. Although the results were reported in the media, they were mainly treated as rumors and not widely covered in major publications. Nonetheless, this didn't matter much, as the world once again stirred with the belief that Hitler survived World War II and was preparing for a second surge. In 2010, conspiracy theories resurfaced, similar to what Stalin did in the years following World War II, under the guise of CIA or FBI classified documents, or what Russia doesn't want you to know, and so on. Once again, even though Stalin had been dead for almost a century, he managed to deceive the world. It wasn't until 2017 that Dr. Philippe Charlier, a French forensic scientist specializing in unusual historical deaths, finally put this century-old rumor to rest. He and his colleagues were allowed by Russia to authenticate the skull and jawbone fragments they were holding. The results, combined with Soviet-era reference documents, definitively confirmed that Hitler had died. In 2018, Dr. Charlier and his team published their research in a European medical journal and announced Hitler's death to the world. This research was recognized by the European scientific community, officially closing the chapter on Stalin's deception. Hitler had indeed died, and it took 73 years to prove this fact conclusively.